That confident in making his stance known, but very weird. Seeing this cover, I would either assume it's a country album or it's super ironic, and then he talks about how screwed up America is, but it's neither of those things. It's just the most generic pop music here before Benson turns into a country artist. Baby Keem's The Melodic Blue looks like an R&B album cover, not a trap cover. Yeah, I mean, a lot of this album isn't really trap either, but it's definitely not R&B. I love this cover, and I also really like the album, but it does look like the cover to a very introspective album, and some of it's kind of introspective about his whole two-phone situation, but a lot of it is just talking about hoes, which is just not what I would think he's thinking about sitting on this beautiful little pier. Punk 2 by Breakin's screams 70s folk album, but it's a blend of hyperpop, emo, glitch hop, and trap. This does look like a folk album. I mean, Breakin's is from the Midwest, right? Or somewhere around there. I feel like the whole hyperpop scene that came out of the Midwest, like Underscores too, has had this really interesting like emo and sometimes folky sound to it. This album, not so much, but it does have enough funky elements that I feel like when you look at it, you don't think it's just a folk album. Like, you might think it's a folk album, but not knowing what it sounds like, I would think there's something a little fishy going on. There's gonna be at least some experimentation, you know? Definitely doesn't match the album as well as some of his other covers, like Hypochondriac. Perfect, amazing, perfection. This one, not so much. Richard D. James' album Aphex Twin. This menacing grin from Mr. Twin himself would remind me more of the scary and intense sounds that were already present in this era of Aphex Twin's career. However, when putting the album on, you are met with the most warm and bubbly songs he has ever produced in his career. Truly a beautiful juxtaposition. You did not have to go so hard writing this little paragraph. I appreciate the context. Yeah, I mean, a lot of Aphex's stuff has that like silly vibe to it, but this one does feel a little more sinister. It gives me the same vibe as that one Blank Mass album. I forget what the name is, but that album cover matches the album perfectly, and it's super dark and spooky. That's what I would imagine this album sounds like in Aphex Twin's own little way, but no, it's really nice little bubbly beats. But I don't know, I mean, maybe he looks so sinister because he knows that he's tricking us with this cover. You think this is gonna be scary, but it's not. You got me, Mr. Twin. I thought it was gonna be scary. The Texas Jerusalem Crossroads by Lift to Experience looks like a cringe southern rock album, but instead it's the best shoegaze album ever. This was the first album cover that I featured on my good album covers video, and I don't think I even have to say that much about it. Instead, I will show you how I reacted to this album. Play the clip, future me. I haven't heard this album, so I'm gonna listen to some of it, and we'll see if it's as bad as the cover. This is a very deceiving cover. Looking at it, you think that one bad album, what is it called? Can't remember the name of it. It will magically appear right here, though. I thought it was going to sound like that album, but it sounds amazing. This one is either a shame or just some expert gatekeeping on their part. Last one, Mad Villainy by MF Doom. It looks like a horrorcore type record, but it's actually some kind of goofy 2000s stoner rap. This album cover is very deceiving. To have such a menacing cover on your album, and then you put it on, and it's just cartoons and cereal. I love eating Doritos, and my Fritos are good too. Comic books are pretty cool. I like reading comic books while I eat my Fritos and cereal. No hate to MF Doom at all. This is one of my favorite albums, but I think a cover like Foods fits MF Doom's vibe a lot more than this scary ass cover. but maybe that's what makes this album so iconic. This is MF Doom, Mad Villain in his true form, eating Doritos, Fritos, and Cheetos. That's the video. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know in the comments if there's a big example of this that I missed. If you liked the video, feel free to leave a like. And if you really liked it, hit the subscribe button. Also join my Discord. And if you like movies, I have a movie channel called Blockbuster. Bye. Oh my god, wait. If you're already subscribed, here's your bluster point. Okay, bye.
Carnival's using all the power from the grid.
Don't worry, I got it covered.
We've been receiving strange anomalies from this location all week, and it seems to be ramping up. Do you have to drink that?
It helps me think.
Look! Another one! Mark the time!
What's the big deal? It's just a carnival.
Nonsense! Mark the time!
But why?
Mark it! What happened? I don't know what to do!
I don't know what could have caused that.
What's going on? The tourist readings are off the charts. It's too much power. You've got to shut it down.
Here's Adventure Island, developed and published by Hudson. Now here's Adventure Island 2. The box has the Hudson logo, but was it really developed by them? How about Ms. Pac-Man on the NES? This was made by Namco, right? Sometimes a game that you might think is made by a certain company isn't really. We're going to take a look at the company that's really behind some of your favorite games. What's going on? It's Bojer coming at you with another video. Alright, do me a favor, if you're not already subscribed, hit that button right down there. I'm trying to see if I can make it to 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year. I do think it's possible. Only you can help me get there. And we have a great community over at our Discord server. If you want to be a part of it, just go to discord.pojer.net. Let's waste no time. Let's talk about Now Production. For a game to be possible, you need a publisher and developer. The developer creates the game while the publisher puts it in stores. You need both a developer and publisher for a game to be successful. A publisher makes sure the game gets released in as many stores as possible so people will buy it. A developer makes sure the game actually exists and it isn't complete crap. In a lot of cases, the publisher and developer of a particular game are the same company. Many of Konami's games like Contra, Castlevania, and Gradius were both developed and published by them, but that's not always the case. Some companies act as only publishers and they hire developers to make games for them. We see the company Acclaim all over boxes, cartridges, and even the game itself, but they didn't develop a single game themselves. On the other hand, some companies are only developers. Instead of publishing games themselves, they're hired by companies like Acclaim to develop games for them. Developers rarely take credit for their work. If you look at any game, you'll always see the publisher's logo on the box or game, but almost never the developers. It might seem weird and unethical, but it's all a business transaction. The developer is only paid to create the game, and that's it. Because the developers are usually not public, we may not always know who's really behind some of our favorite games. Take the company Now Production. Originally founded in 1986, Now Production developed games for companies that you wouldn't expect, like Taito, Hudson, Namco, and even Nintendo. While I'm not positive on this, I assume the name Now Production comes from the fact that they develop games quickly on demand for companies that need it. Speaking of games, let's take a look at some. Let's start off with Taito Grand Prix. You would think Taito would have developed this one since their name is in the title, but it wasn't. It's a racing game with some unique features. You have a world map where you can access the levels you want to play. You can only compete in courses that you qualify for. Each time you complete a course, you earn money, but if you fail to do so, you lose money. You can buy new items for your vehicle, and you can make repairs and changes. When you're actually racing, it feels like pole position or Rad Racer, where you only have a limited amount of time and the checkpoints will give you time extensions. The graphics are very ambitious. The background terrain will change frequently, even in the middle of a stage. I love how the clouds appear when you're on the beach level. Overall, I'm honestly impressed. I was expecting this to be a mediocre racing game, but it's actually very underrated. I highly recommend this one. Let's try Splatterhouse Wanpaku Graffiti. This was originally a beat-em-up by Namco, but it was turned into a platformer by Now Production. You play as Rick, and you must walk to the right to find the exit. You start off with an axe, but you can collect temporary weapons later on. There's usually a boss at the end of each area. You have a life bar, which gradually increases as you destroy more enemies. Because it's a platformer and not a beat-em-up, some of the levels are larger and scroll in multiple directions. The controls are surprisingly decent. Even though your main weapon is a short range, I never had an issue connecting my attacks. Your character also doesn't stop in place when using his weapons, which I prefer. The graphics are a mixed bag. Unlike the arcade version, which was more realistic and gory, the Famicom game went with a more cartoony style. Some of the levels use parallax scrolling, which looks nice, but I don't like the color scheme they chose for this game. Everything looks so dark and depressing, but that might have been the intention. Surprisingly, this is the first console appearance of the Splatterhouse series. I would have never expected Namco or Now Production to lead with a game like this, but I do think it's a decent game overall. Namco most likely hired Now Production for this game because it's not an official entry in the Splatterhouse series, but a parody. Let's try Jackie Chan's Action Kung Fu, which was developed by Now Production. It's a side-scroller. You start off with a basic punch and kick, but you can collect special moves that give you more power. You can take a few hits before you die, and you have a few continues. The game has vertical and horizontal stages, and there's a lot of diversity in the gameplay. The controls could be better. Jackie Chan's basic attacks don't have the best range, which makes it hard to hit enemies. Your punches and kicks have to be lined up perfectly or else you'll miss. Your biggest threats are flying enemies and projectiles. The bosses, on the other hand, have very predictable patterns, which makes them easy to destroy. The graphics could be better. I don't like Jackie Chan's sprite all that much, and there's a lot of missing color and detail. With that said though, I do think this is a decent game. If you look at the box, Hudson's logo is all over it, but Now Production is nowhere to be found. This is just an example of how the publisher takes all the credit while the developer doesn't get any recognition. Now Production also released it on the TurboGrafx 16, and several improvements were made. Jackie's attacks have a more lenient hitbox, so I didn't have as much trouble trying to hit my targets. The graphics are obviously way better, which is expected on a more powerful console. The stages are much bigger, some of which scroll in multiple directions. This was not a thing in the original NES version. The bosses have been improved significantly. The first boss, for example, can only be destroyed using their hands as platforms, which is a cool mechanic. In the NES version, the boss is much smaller in size, and you can easily reach them by jumping on the side platforms. Not as interesting in my opinion. Overall, they took the original NES version and made it way better. You're probably familiar with the Adventure Island series. The first game was developed and published by Hudson. You play as Master Higgins and you must reach the end of the stage without running out of health. Master Higgins has extremely high metabolism, so he must collect food to keep his health up. If you run out of health or get hit by an enemy, you die. You start off with no weapon, but you can collect a hammer which lets you attack enemies. You can also collect the skateboard which allows you to take a second hit, but you can only move forward when you have it. The original game is bare bones. Many of the tiles and backgrounds are reused numerous times, and some stages are exactly the same but with minor alterations. You're really not getting much of a game. But for a 64 kilobyte game, it's understandable. Hudson developed other Adventure Island games which kept the same core concept. They never deviated too much from the original NES game. This was not the case with Adventure Island 2 though. Instead of developing the games themselves, Hudson commissioned Now Production to make this one. They made some significant changes. You can ride various dinosaurs, which lets you take an extra hit. Each dinosaur has their own ability, whether it's flight or being able to walk on lava. You can store excess items in your inventory, which is a welcomed feature. If you die on a stage, for example, you can grab items from your inventory. The screen moves in all directions, and some levels are large. This is unlike the original game, which only moved in one direction at a time. I do give credit for implementing diagonal scrolling though. There's an overworld map, which was not a thing in the original game. Overall, Now Production took the Adventure Island formula and made it their own. This is a far better game than the original. Once again, if you look at the box, you don't see Now Production mentioned anywhere on it, but Hudson is front and center. The Game Boy version made some sacrifices. The physics are weird. Your jumping is floatier than the NES version. When you collide into a wall, notice that you still keep your momentum. If you hit an egg in the wrong direction, it will go inside the walls. You can exit stages backwards if you push the button at the right time. Unfortunately, there's not as many stages in this version, and the overworld maps for each world are no longer here. The bosses can be defeated within seconds without any effort. The game also has way too much slowdown. Look at this. Overall, it's a crappier version, but they still captured the Adventure Island 2 experience. I wasn't able to find out who the developer of this game actually was. I assume it was Now Production, but I'm not positive. Hudson was most likely impressed with Adventure Island 2 and decided to rehire them for the third game. This one didn't have as many changes. They added a fifth dinosaur which can perform rolls. There's a few more items like the boomerang which gives you a better range. A couple new stage designs were introduced, some of which have new music. The overworld maps are similar to Adventure Island 2, where you see Master Higgins walk to a random location. Unfortunately, this game feels more like a ROM hack of the previous game. Most of the music was ripped from Adventure Island 2. Some stage graphics were copy-pasted without any changes. Now Production didn't go all out with Adventure Island 3 like they did with 2, but I still think it's a great game. Maybe they just wanted to play it safe. The Game Boy version, on the other hand, is actually better. Master Higgins is not as floaty like he was in the original Game Boy game. The overworld map is more like Super Mario World, and you can even redo stages if you want. The bosses are improved from the NES version. In that game, the bosses are either completely stationary or have predictable movement patterns. In the Game Boy port though, they're smarter and they move around more. There's even a password feature which was not a thing in Adventure Island 3. There's not nearly as much slowdown as there was in the first Game Boy game. Honestly, this game feels like an updated version of Adventure Island 3. Not only is it better than that game, but it's an improvement from the original Game Boy game. Let's take a quick look at Adventure Island 4, which was the final game in the series by Now Production. They must have realized the third game didn't change enough because this one is drastically different. Instead of a linear platformer, it's now an exploration game. It's not obvious what you're supposed to do right away, and you'll start off wandering around. You're supposed to collect weapons that give you access to new areas where you then fight the boss. By defeating the boss, you unlock a new character. You no longer have depleting health. Instead, you have a normal life bar. The fruits will restore a health point if you collect 10 of them. The game is too unforgiving in my opinion. If you die, even just one time, you lose all your weapons, which means you have to defeat all the mini-bosses again. The fact that you only have 2 health points at the beginning makes this game too difficult. To be fair though, you can increase your capacity of hearts throughout the game. Some areas require the dinosaurs, but if you get hit, you lose them, which means that you're trapped. Your only solution is to return to the starting point and pick them up again. Overall, it's okay, but I don't like the direction they went with this game, and I wish they kept the original formula. Overall, Now Production took the Adventure Island series in a direction that Hudson never did. Hudson's own developed games always stayed true to the original Adventure Island formula with purely side-scrolling gameplay and basic weapons and upgrades. It was Now Production's games that introduced level maps, riding dinosaurs, and more diverse gameplay. I wish the newer games in the series implemented some of the features that Now Production added to their games, but we'll never see it. Not all of their games were winners though. Here's Ms. Pac-Man. Years before this, Tengen made their own version and it's unbeatable in terms of quality. Not only do you have the original arcade game, but there's plenty of extra levels. Graphically, it looks better than any home console version I've ever seen. Even the sound effects are close to the arcade original. Tengen could have given us the bare minimum, but instead they went above and beyond. Now Production's version is okay. They played it safe by only offering the arcade game and nothing more. There are a few extra stages if you make it far enough, but you can't select them from the start. The graphics look nothing like the arcade original, and the color scheme doesn't match at all. This is one aspect they definitely could have improved. The game sounds nothing like the original Pac-Man either. This version is terrible compared to Tengen's. I do find it funny though, because if Tengen's version didn't exist, this would probably be an okay game. Overall, Now Production's games are mostly above average in quality. They might have been just a developer, but they treated every property like it was their own. For example, they didn't have to go all out on Adventure Island 2, but they did. It might seem weird that they didn't receive credit for their games, but that was the company's business model. They were paid to develop games anonymously. If a publisher needed a game quickly, hiring a company like Now Production was a great option. If you made it this far in the video, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button right there. And what is your favorite game by Now Production? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.
The simple farm game that broke record after record and became the most played game in the whole planet, surpassing even Fortnite by a massive difference of concurrent players, reaching its peak record of over 22 million players, averaging more than 2 million per day, has already lost more than half of its players, with even its own main developer Jandel looking for ways to revive Gorogot. And in this video, you will see all the reasons and the bad decisions that were made that led to this tragic downfall. Mainly regarding the inflation of the Shackles currency and the absurd application exploits that completely cooked the game's economy. And that is exactly what brings us to the first point of this decline. When the amount of money skyrockets within an economy, it loses the value you once had, making the price of everything rise and become more expensive to match the low value of the currency. And this directly affects the arrival of new players, since everything will be expensive for them and their money will be worth less. While the players who already had sextillions don't even feel this impact. Several reasons led the simple farm game that broke record after record and became the most played game in the whole planet, surpassing even Fortnite by a massive difference of concurrent players, reaching its peak record of over 22 million players, averaging more than 2 million per day, has already lost more than half of its players, with even its own main developer Jandel looking for ways to revive Gorogod. And in this video, you will see all the reasons and the bad decisions that were made that led to this tragic downfall. Mainly regarding the inflation of the shekels currency and the absurd application exploits that completely cooked the game's economy. And that is exactly what brings us to the first point of this decline. When the amount of money skyrockets within an economy, it loses the value you once had, making the price of everything rise and become more expensive to match the low value of the currency. And this directly affects the arrival of new players, since everything will be expensive for them and their money will be worth less. While the players who already had sextillions don't even feel this impact. Several reasons led to the extreme inflation of shekels in Gorogod, but the main one was definitely the addition of the most beloved and iconic pet in the game, the raccoon. Its ability to duplicate plants infinitely worked like a shekel sprinter, and several people in private servers would even rent their gardens with a single plant of absurd value, like a candy or a bone blossom, or even the 700 trillion honeysuckles, for you to spend hours duplicating those plants with your raccoon. So imagine the amount of new and even old players frustrated after spending weeks or months grinding the game honestly to reach 100 trillion shekels, while another player spends 4 hours duplicating quadrillions of shekels through a rented plant in a private server, injecting huge amounts of money into the economy and making the devs choose to increase the price of all items in an attempt to keep up with the mountain of shekels that player had duplicated, inflating the game's economy and devaluing its own currency. But in doing so, you punish those players who play the game honestly and make them lose the will and excitement of the grind, since until you have a good amount of shekels, they won't be worth anything against inflation. And it will also put the interest of new players. It's not only unfair or harmful to your own game, it's completely poorly balanced and executed. A simple solution that would have helped with this issue and was suggested by the community was simply adding a nerf to the raccoon's ability, one that made it possible to duplicate each plant only once, avoiding the cloning of those plants with absurd values in an unlimited and broken way. But not only did they fail to fix this gigantic problem for the economy in still time, they doubled it with the addition of another pet with the same duplication ability as the raccoon, the Kitsunes. I don't know. And along with them also came the biggest backlash involving the game's microtransactions up to that point, and many associated this episode with Grogod's involvement, specifically Jandel's, with the most destructive company known in Roblox. Do Big Studios, known by many as the Ripper of Games, as everyone already knows, is a company with a history and a certain connection to Jandel that buys games with extreme potential and takes over everything from marketing to development, investing heavily. All that just to turn the game into the most pay-to-win casino known in the history of mankind. It acquired the games like a Blade Ball, a Dusty Trap, which was initially bought by Jandel and after some time handed over to Do Big's development, apparently after Jandel received hate for making the game too pay-to-win. Do Big also acquired part of Still a Brain, Great Fish, and eventually a part of Grow a Garden, together with Jandel, and the Kitsune was the first prismatic pet in the game, and up until then the most OP, being an even more broken version of the raccoon, because besides also duplicating plants, he could still apply a mutation with a 190x multiplier, which was insane at the time. The problem was that all the best pets by default had a 1% chance of being obtained, which was already extremely low. But the Kitsune came with a ridiculously absurd and unbelievable chance of only 0.08%. Not 0.8%, it was 0.08%. To give you one idea, at 1% chance you will need on average 100 attempts to get one. But at 0.08% chance, you will need on average 1,250 attempts. The backlash from the community was astronomical and instant because of this absurd and even surprising scam, since, of course, Grow a Garden already had its microtransactions, but until then, nothing on such a bizarre, out of this world and unfair level. This resulted in players wasting a lot of time grinding trying to get a Kitsune before the event ended, or players spending thousands and thousands of Robux also trying to get one and not even coming close because of this almost insignificant chance. It ended with Jandel publicly apologizing on the Discord server for not respecting the community with this completely pay-to-win scam, giving players PTSD from the time when the combination of Jandel plus Dopey ruined a dusty trip with infinite microtransactions. And to this day, many people believe that this was nothing more than a suggestion from the studios, since as an investor, they also have to make their profit somehow. But Jandel ended up backtracking after the huge backlash from the community, though the profit from this casino had already been made and the damage had already been done. And now there were 2 economy breaking pets circulating in the game. But even if you kept all the abilities of those pets that are extremely broken, it would be fine because they are extremely rare to get, right? No. Grow a Garden also suffered from another problem that turned out to be even bigger and more harmful than the duplication of infinite shackles using the unlimited abilities exploits of the Kitsune and the Raccoon. The duplication of the Kitsunes and Raccoons themselves. Thousands of them were duplicated using a duppy glitch at the time, which ended up making them being distributed and sold to other players. You use those 2 clone pets precisely to clone monstrously valuable plants from players in private servers, and keep farming and injecting infinite shackles into the game. The most impressive part is that this turned into an extremely profitable business for the duplicators of those pets, since thousands of them were sold on big platforms like the famous eBay, and many of them were sold. Many. Once again, this could have been easily avoided with the implementation of a unique code identification system for each in-game item. This would make each item in the game have a kind of unique tag code. And then, as soon as the system detected that something was duplicated and that there were 2 identical items with the exactly same code, it would easily flag this duplicated item, making their detection easier, but this was not done in time. And to try to fix this non-stop duplication, the devs completely disabled the possibility of gifting pets for an indefinite time, making many players frustrated about it, because trading pets in the game had always been one of the core mechanics of the game. So finally, they fixed the glitch and reactivated pet trading again. The damage had already been done once more, and this time infinitely duplicated. Literally. When the economy was already completely cooked, a popular system was implemented that has a few different names depending on the game. The most famous ones being Prestige, Rebirth, Soft Reset, or in the case of Grow a Garden, Ascension. The system is used in several other games with progression stall after players accumulate too much of the game's unique currency over time, leaving the numbers absurd and creating a huge economic gap between new and old players. So the games implement the system, creating a new layer in the economy with a new currency and new things to be bought with this new currency. And the players obtain this new currency by trading the old one for it, resetting their current progress. But besides receiving a good amount of new coins in exchange, since they have many old coins, they also receive perks or other permanent things in the game, making them not feel like they lost their fortunes for nothing. And Grow a Garden tried this with Ascension, but it was a complete disaster. Many players didn't even know what the so-called reset system was about, and the interface of Ascension didn't help at all. Yes, it was written that the player would lose all their shackles for just 1 new coin, but below in the requirements there was a fixed number at 1 trillion, and many people thought that this was the number of shackles you would lose when ascending, but that was actually just the minimum shackles requirement needed to ascend. This resulted in thousands of players instantly deleting all the shackles they had, and regardless of how many shackles it was, they would still only get 1 single new coin. And because this wasn't clear for many players, this was exactly what caused the biggest drop in player count in the game up to that point, purely out of frustration for having lost all their shackles for basically nothing. They felt like they had lost everything they had achieved up to that point, and also they felt tricked. Later, this was adjusted, making it fairer and easier to understand, giving 10 new coins for just 1 trillion shekels, and not everything you had for just 1 coin like before. But by then, it was already too late. Many people had lost all their shekels and the will to play, leading to the biggest drop in player in the game so far. Even a poll ended up being made by Jandel on Discord between modifying the requirements or just removing the ascension mechanic entirely, which was clearly winning, by the way. But it could not be done without creating another problem, because simply removing it would harm a lot of people who were farming this new currency, making all their work useless. So it wasn't that easy to just remove the whole mechanic. That's why, to compensate, Jandal promised good rewards for those who had lost all their shackles in this poorly made ascension. But by then, it had already caused a lot of damage in the community again. Before we proceed into this next sensitive topic, I just want to say that this is the channel's first video, and it would mean a lot to us if you subscribe to encourage us to keep bringing high quality content like this video here. Thank you. Now back to it. Jandel has always been the main figure of Grow a Garden, frequently posting on his TikTok, often interacting on his Discord server, was also 90% of the times the main character of the admin abuses. And in general, in everyone's view, he was a cool guy with strong principles, hate-proof, and also the developer and fully owner of our favorite game. But not even he escaped the apparently inevitable expose that sooner or later always ends up happening. Several users on X and even huge YouTubers like Parlo took part in this expose of Jandel. Well, in fact, it's more about someone Jandel has in his close circle, Adrian, known as BMW Lux, the original creator of Grow a Garden. To give context, it all started with people digging up an old tweet from Jandel in October 2024, saying that he would stop acquiring games and focus on his own projects, because he felt like he needed to prove to himself that he was capable of creating his own top-tier games without needing to buy games from other developers, just to continue and fix them, and that this practice of buying games was starting to get too toxic for him to be part of. However, a few months later, in April 2025, Jandel would break his own word by buying his share of Grow a Garden from the original creator, BMW Lux, which already made many people doubt Jandel's character and word after seeing this post of his. This even generated repercussion at the Roblox Innovation Awards, when the host, J-Party, asked Jandel the following question.
So Jandel, as a professional maker of subpar games, would you say your parents are extremely or moderately disappointed in you?
Moderately?
I'd have to agree. You won't see a shrink about that. Anyway.
And of course, it was a joke. But that didn't stop the public opinion reaction in saying that this was actually a fact. And others like this saying, well, it's not like Jandel makes his own games, Moserbat. Or this one saying, calling him creator is crazy, considering he bought his way to success. The second part of this expose came from the fact that Jandel doesn't own 100% of the game, and that 50% of Grow a Garden still belongs to BMW Lux, very possibly making him the partner with the largest percentage of the game, since the other 50% is divided between Jandel's company and also the big studios. But BMW Lux also had his own exposed, being unmasked as a doxer, scammer, false DMCA abuser, and leaker of other people's games for years, with multiple proofs showing how pathetic and in bad faith Adrian behaved in the developer circle. And then you probably ask me, but what does this have to do with Jandel? He doesn't go along with any of that. He just bought the game from Adrian. It's just business. And I would even agree with you if it weren't for the multiple messages from Jandel defending Adrian, where he tried to soften the extensive pattern of disgusting actions from Adrian over several years, both as a game developer and also as a human being, and always hammering the argument that everyone makes mistakes when they are young, and Adrian was young at the time and still is. And by the way, he was 16 when he created Grow a Garden. And also saying that he is a good kid who is committed to correcting his mistakes and becoming a trustworthy figure in the community. Even though Adrian never publicly apologized nor compensated his mistakes with all the people who showed proof of the despicable actions he committed against them. This was a clear attempt by Jandel to soften and clean up the image of his partner, because how could you not defend and maintain a good relationship with someone who holds 50% of your most profitable business? As business partners, they need to have a good relationship with each other. But Adrian's actions were not just small mistakes like Jandel made them seem. Among the many things Adrian did, there were episodes like stealing all the revenue of a developer he agreed to do a 50-50 split partnership with, and even doxing this developer by threatening to leak his address, house photos, and personal information after he had been exposed. He also took down games with false DMCA claims, bringing down the original game and creating a copy of the game and stealing the entire audience, and much more. And this went on for multiple years with several other developers that he also screwed over. And Jandel, who is also a developer just like all of Adrian's victims, defending this kind of person with the shallow excuse that he was too young and we all make mistakes when we are young, as if that justified it, downplaying the seriousness of these actions and saying that he is committed to correcting his mistakes, even though Adrian never made any public apology, was a very unfortunate event for those who saw Jandel as a figure of principles. People felt that Jandel put his principles aside for business ambition by defending someone who caused so much harm to people with the same professional Jandel has, the famous damage control. They are partners despite everything. And apparently, that comes first. And many of you may not even know, but the official Grow Garden Discord server was just as active as the game itself. It had several interaction channels, chaotic voice chats, among many other things. But the best one, without a doubt, was the suggestion channel, where players gave their improvement suggestions, opinions on topics and updates, sent ideas and even concepts for new items and even mechanics that were actually seen by the developers and added to the game. And with enough votes from the community, these suggestions would end up in the Starboard, a channel that contained only the most upvoted ideas and suggestions by the community itself. And I lost count of how many times I saw suggestions with thousands of votes from the public, talking about solutions or alternatives to fix problems that were slowly killing the game. And some even had a step-by-step, and it wasn't anything that hard. Many of them offered solutions that were even extremely simple, but that would definitely work. Several different solutions from the community for the problems of inflation, duplication of items and pets, scam methods, and even the rework of poorly introduced mechanics, like the very poorly planned Ascension system, which was rushed in an attempt to solve the problem of inflation in the economy and ended up creating an even bigger problem than it, and a lot of other options from the passionate community that breathed Grow a Garden and only wanted to see the game improving. 90% of them were not listened. Bad implementations were kept, and attempts to fix the problems they eventually caused seemed even worse. And of the many alternatives the community offered, almost none seemed to be taken into consideration, and something completely different and controversial ended up being added as a fixing measure. But the community didn't just offer intuitive feedback about correcting bad decisions or suggestions with very good ideas. They were also the first ones to alert about the imminent dangers to the lifespan of the game, such as the pet passives that were breaking the game, such as the combination of the toucan with the honeysuckle, giving life to 700 trillion shekel plants that were being duplicated non-stop by duplicated kitsunes and raccoons, inflating the game's economy. They also gave feedback about the unfairness of certain updates being too hard to complete or too tedious and boring, and that this discouraged players who would not longer be interested in seeing the next ones. But how can a game that updates every week, always with new content, be boring? It doesn't make sense, right? Well, it does. When the game was fresh, the devs definitely had several update ideas ready to be put into the game. But the idea of making a brand new update every week from scratch changing almost everything in the game with a completely different aesthetic and interesting mechanics would not be sustainable for long. Not to mention the fact that it would always leave the players with very high expectations for these extremely frequent updates. In the first weeks, the updates were always super new and added a lot of things, mainly new mechanics that would later remain permanently in the game, like pets, crafting, recipes, and etc. And everyone loved at the time, but this would not be sustainable for long, and the community started complaining heavily about these weekly updates, saying they seem to have become more of the same, with mechanics reused from past updates, just with another name and another look, but nothing really new that changed more like what used to be added before. It started to feel more like a new weekly theme with a different skin than an actual update that truly added additional things to the game like the first ones did. And Jandel himself acknowledged this in the same Discord post in August where he apologized for the Kitsune episode, saying that honestly he was out of good ideas for events since he had been making new events for the past 3 months and therefore was creatively drained. And before that, he had said several people were criticizing the latest updates, saying they seemed rushed, low quality, and uninspired, and that it was too hard to always bring good and fresh events. And he also said that due to the absurd growth of Grow a Garden, he had to expand their team size, and they even created a new team that would create new events, giving more development time between each update, which would eventually result in more polished and unique events like the first ones. Of course, Jandel thought Grow a Garden had potential, that's why he took on the project, but I find it unlikely he thought more than 20 million players will be playing the game at the same time waiting for those updates. But maybe they took too long to expand the team, considering the game was breaking record after record every week, and he knew he would eventually run out of good new event ideas, as he himself said. And lastly, 1 month after that, Jandel said that Grow a Garden would have a new era. And because of the extended criticism from the community regarding repeated events, they had finally decided that weekly events were too difficult to always keep new and fresh. And he had decided that a new era of Grow a Garden was necessary and more depth in the farms would be implemented. This made everyone believe that the events would stop being weekly and they would instead focus on other more important things. And that made a lot of people happy, including me, because I had the feeling that they were always more focused on creating more and more new things with these new weekly updates, which isn't necessarily bad. However, in the beginning when the game had fewer mechanics and content in general, it was fine. But along with the weekly updates came new problems, new glitches, new exploits that were harming the game in the long term, which didn't have time to be fixed. Precisely because they were more concerned about creating more and more instead of keeping the game balanced and stable, and above all, fun, keeping up with their own updates. But at the end, the events continued being released weekly, in the same way after that. And the community kept insisting that the events were becoming less and less interesting, just with the same mechanics with different skins. And many other wrong decisions kept harming the game and the players, such as the fact that multiple shadow nerfs happened between updates, without having a log being transparent about these changes with the community, who only asked for transparency from the developers. Also the tax on the shackles transfer between players, which was also very bad received. And even the very mechanic of being able to transfer shackles to another player was criticized, because rich players with money from duplicated plans would also go around distributing infinite shackles to new players, decreasing the value of the currency for those who already had lots of money, and increasing the difficulty for those who played honestly without duplicated shackles, and saw the price of all items rise astronomically because of the shackles inflation. The absurd disadvantage of losing even one admin abuse where all the rewards kept getting bigger and bigger each week, because you would fall far behind those who participated in the admin abuses and the rewards they obtained. The massive imbalance in the abilities of certain pets like toucans with tropical category plants that gave life to that honeysuckle worth almost 1 quadrillion shackles that was infinitely duplicated afterwards. That Neon Terror bug that made pets have their ability cooldowns reduced to just 15 seconds. The cooldown time between quests Cooking, crafting, and event refreshes become longer and longer and more tedious, forcing you to stay in the game as long as possible in a grind that made everything boring and difficult, and mainly the negligence towards the opinions and suggestions of the very community passionate about the game. That would have avoided many of these mentioned problems if they had been listened to more, were just some of the reasons that made the biggest game in Roblox history to lose more than 70% of its players, and keep losing. But I still have hope that Grow Garden will one day return to its glory days. Consider subscribing, and thank you for watching your new favorite creator, Bihal.
I'm sure that by now you're well aware of what the concept of crowdfunding is. It involves someone coming up with an interesting idea, and in order to make that idea come to life, they ask people who are interested in it to fund it. For me personally, one of the first websites that come to mind when I think of crowdfunding is Kickstarter. One could actually say that it was one of its early pioneers. And while it did create a lot of success stories, on the other side of that same coin, it also created a lot of horror stories. There are so many examples of disastrous Kickstarter campaigns, ones that were fully funded by the community, sometimes exceeding the goal, and yet they still managed to either under-deliver or straight up not deliver anything, with the most common reason simply being inexperience and mismanagement. One of the most infamous examples of this was back in 2014 by the massive channel at the time, the Yogscast. They wanted to make their own game and raised over $500,000 only to then fail spectacularly. They hired the wrong people, got scammed, and ended up giving a completely unrelated game to their backers as an apology instead of refunding them. It was a huge story, and their reputation never truly recovered after this. But just like how failed campaigns can be because of inexperience or mismanagement or both, sometimes you get the added bonus of extremely scummy and nasty behavior. And that's exactly what ended up happening with PuffPal's Island Skies. Marketed as an extremely wholesome and cozy game meant to compete directly with already well-established titles such as Animal Crossing. So many people ended up being charmed by this game that it had beaten its original goal by 3,300%. This was back in 2022. Today, we're in 2025. And if you go to this button that says pre-order the game, you're met with a page that says that the original domain of this game is now for sale at the very low price of $100. How the hell could this happen to a game who wanted to only raise $75,000 and ended up with over $2.5 million? And why the hell are there 5 total lawsuits currently ongoing suing the developer for almost the same amount they raised, which is $2.1 million? Well, as you might expect, this didn't happen overnight. This is a multi-year disaster that involved scamming over 42,000 backers, but also anyone they pretty much hired for this project while currently dodging multiple lawsuits. If you've seen catastrophic crowdfunding campaigns before, then trust me, this is on another level. This topic was suggested to me by a viewer in my Discord, and seeing that only a few people have discussed this, I figured that we had to talk about it. So, let's do this. Alright, so here's the deal. The game, PuffPal's Island Skies, didn't just come out of nowhere. The company behind it is Fluffnest, and they were an extremely successful plushie company. It was actually founded back in 2020 and had very humble beginnings on Kickstarter, managing to raise over $170,000 as the community was very captivated by its very adorable plushies. What really put them on the map, other than their very cute plushie designs, was how quickly and effectively they were able to grow their social media accounts, accruing hundreds of thousands of followers. The person behind these very cute plushie designs was none other than Lily, and she ran Fluffnest with the co-founder, David. And I mean, look, it didn't take long. After blowing up on social media so quickly, their reputation also took off. Within the plushie enthusiast community, they were known as having high quality, soft, and durable plushies. And while they found big success within this community, David and Lily saw further opportunity in a domain heavily lacking competition: cozy games. I mean, look, just as an example, there's this one Facebook group with over 600,000 members by the name of Cozy Gamers. These people are always on the lookout for something that's cozy, and they are not shy spenders. You give them something they want, and they'll gladly give you all the money you're asking for. As an example, Stardew Valley is a game that perfectly fits their criteria, and by December 2024, the game had sold over 41 million copies. A number that can easily make multi-billion-dollar companies jealous. On the other hand, one of its few competitors is Animal Crossing on Nintendo consoles. And if we talk about the Nintendo Switch specifically with its first-party game roster, Animal Crossing New Horizons was the second best-selling game at 47 million copies, with only Mario Kart 8 Deluxe selling more. And for whatever reason, it was also breaking physical copy records, specifically in Japan, selling over 8 million units. It was undeniable at this point. This market wanted more cozy games, and they were willing to spend a lot for them. And so, as people online were never running out of good things to say about Fluff Nest, like this user saying they're very high quality, honestly better than most smaller plush companies, I definitely recommend them, Fluff Nest decided to tap into that reputation in order to take the unorthodox route of developing their own cozy game set within the universe of its own plushies, which they called Puff Pals. They would reveal the trailer of this game to the world for the first time during the Wholesome Direct showcase. This is an indie game showcase focused on cozy games that's part of the Summer Game Fest. The game's name was going to be Puff Pals Island Skies. And to say that people were excited about something that seemed to be maybe the first worthy competitor to Animal Crossing was an understatement. Fluff Nest would use its already well-established presence on social media to advertise the game, and since it was directly related to its plushy universe, it didn't feel out of place. It felt just right, and it made people who were already interested in their plushies check out the game too. What would then follow is such an extremely well-executed Kickstarter campaign that you'd think you were dealing with someone who has a PhD in marketing. In reality though, you were dealing with the Wolf of Wall Street. Around April 7th, 2022, Puff Pals Island Skies would officially launch its crowdfunding campaign on Kickstarter with the goal of $75,000. It didn't take long for it though to completely eclipse that initial goal, and within just a couple of weeks, it would top over $1 million in funding. And I mean, if you look at this timeline here, by April 30th, 2022, they had reached $1.3 million. However, what's ridiculously impressive here is that within a week, on May 7th, they had doubled that amount, raising over $2.5 million and calling this campaign an astounding success. This is when Lily would make a personal post thanking everyone for making her dream come true. But hold on a second, let's take a step back here. Social media presence for a plushie company can definitely help with a game like this, but to beat your initial funding goal by 3,300%? How did that even happen exactly? Well, of course, there's a number of factors. Most campaigns on Kickstarters will have stretch goals. The initial goal would be to literally just make the game at its most basic form, but the more money you raise, the more features you unlock, like cooking, fishing, a free pet for all backers, and of course multiplayer at $1 million. That definitely helped with motivation for funding. What also helped is that the Kickstarter itself seemed very professionally made. You had a lot of the features already laid out as if they were already being worked on. And the fact that this was going to be not just on PC, but on Mac, mobile, and Switch as well, that made it all the more enticing. But still, it doesn't really explain why they made so much damn money. One could look at the different tiers, like how there were some that were priced at $5,000, allowing you to design your own Puff Pal to be an NPC in the game, for example. Or how for $2,500 each, you could design either an outfit or a pet. Those definitely helped, seeing that every one of those tiers completely sold out. But still, there was one missing piece of the puzzle here that really helped them raise so much money in such a short period of time. And the answer to that, of course, is plushies. When I told you about Fluff Nest, I wasn't fully honest when it came to their business model. Yeah, they made big, very high quality and soft plushies, but they didn't make them permanently. When one of their many designs would sell out, it wouldn't be restocked. So there was a big factor of FOMO, otherwise known as fear of missing out. As you can see, this dragon, for example, was limited edition. Once it would sell out, it would never get sold again. This is part of the reason why their business was so successful. You'd have people spend a lot of money trying to collect as many of these plushies as they could, because once sold out, they'd never be sold again. Fluff Nest understood this all too well, which is where add-ons come in. You see, in a Kickstarter, you can pledge whatever tier you want, like for example, getting the game for $20, but then after having pledged, you can add add-ons to your total order. And in this case, they had quite a few plushies that were very highly sought after, sold only on Kickstarter, never to be sold again anywhere else, especially not their website. But since you could only buy them after pledging an amount to the Kickstarter campaign itself, it of course made many want to just pledge, for example, $1, or hell, buy the whole game for $20, and then add this on. And of course, the amount of money paid on the add-ons would contribute to the total pledge. So if you bought the game for $20 and a plushie for $45, your total pledge would be $65, and it would count to the total $2.5 million raised. And here's the deal, seeing that this game had 42,000 backers, all you have to do is divide 2.5 million by 42,000 and you'll see that the average pledge by backers on this game was close to $59 each. Seeing that over 30,000 of those backers paid $20 for the game or $30 for alpha access, it's safe to say that most of them bought an add-on like a plushie that truly helped this game raise such a ridiculous amount of money in such a short amount of time. It seemed like Fluffnest really knew what they were doing, to a worrying degree. This was an incredible effort and made people have the highest of expectations for this game's development. So once the campaign ended, there was no time to waste. For the next year and a half, they would encourage all backers to join their official Discord server to hang out and build a community together, and this is where you'd also be able to interact directly with both Lily and David Pentland, as we can see right here on this video call, in which they were having fun designing a tea house. They would also share some processes of the game's development, like its music production, and overall, it seemed like they were on the right track. But, as you can imagine, it wouldn't take long until they would have to face their first setback. On September 22, 2023, Fluffnest would post an update on its Kickstarter. The alpha's release date was being delayed by around a month. It was meant to come out on September 2023 and was now being delayed until the end of October of that same year. They would explain that they're doing this for design changes, implementation, quality assurance freeze, a 1-week buffer for whatever reason. But hey, even though it was a slight delay, people didn't really think much of it. And honestly, at the time, if you still wanted a refund, you could get it. Not to mention that Fluffnest wasn't just hiring just about anyone to work on this game. They had hired Room 8 Studio to do the outsourcing for, well, the majority of the game. This is a studio with many AAA games in its portfolio, so hey, Fluffnest was taking this seriously. And so the big day came on October 31st, 2023, almost a year and a half after fully funding the campaign over 3,000% of their funding goal. They would finally release the alpha. If you were an alpha backer, you would receive a key and you'd redeem it on Steam. However, just one thing to point out before we get into the alpha itself, around a week beforehand, they wanted to confirm the participation of backers in the alpha. That way they can send them the keys. But the way they did this was in a survey format. So if you were an alpha backer and didn't see this update, you wouldn't get a key. And hell, if you were an alpha backer and filled this form out, you probably also wouldn't get a key because it was kind of disorganized. But guys, don't worry, after a couple weeks of this alpha, Fluffnest had collected its feedback and things were going smoothly. People were kind of okay with the controls, hated the camera, had a lot of feedback to give, and Fluffnest was listening. They were already ready to work on Alpha 2. Let's go! Yeah, sure, there's a few backers in the comments saying, I've never received my alpha key, but whatever. They'll get it for Alpha 2, okay? Don't worry. During the first alpha, within the first and second week, they had released the Alpha 1.1 patch and the Alpha 1.2 patch. This was normal. And when the testing period had ended and they had collected their feedback, backers were expecting the next big patch to be, well, Alpha 2. But a few months had passed by, and in February 21st, 2024, they had released Alpha 1.3 with max support. There were a lot of enhancements, updates, patches, bug fixes. I mean, yeah, sure, they were taking their time and being a bit slower, but hey, at least they were doing something, right? Well, almost no one could have predicted this at the time, but this innocent post filled with many exciting updates to the game would actually be the last ever meaningful update that this game would ever receive. So up until this point, this game was great at keeping its community updated both on Discord and its Kickstarter page, not going more than 1 or 2 months without an update. But all of a sudden, since February of 2024, they had not posted anything and the silence was deafening. People were thinking, guys, where's the game at? What's going on? And so it wasn't until August 5th, 2024, 6 months after their last update, that they actually posted something on Kickstarter, saying, you may have noticed that we've been a bit quieter than usual with our updates. During this time, we've been doing work behind the curtains, making sure we're on the right track and refining our plans. While we may not have updates as frequently as before, we want to assure you that progress is being made. Although some details are still being finalized, we're excited about the direction we're headed and we're committed to sharing important milestones with you. Thank you for always having our back, and we can't wait to show you what's next. With a cute little pleading face emoji. Aww. They would then go ahead and showcase some things they've been working on, like the fishing minigames, the Puff Pals themselves in the game, how they're gonna look. But as you can see, for the majority of this post, it was mostly just concept art. They only showed off one biome and some little aspect of the UI, but then the other half of this post was the community corner where they talk about stuff happening in the Discord server. It was a very lackluster update for having waited 6 months. Some backers said things like, "Finally, I've been waiting for an update for ages. Thank you for the update and hopefully it'll be more frequent." It was definitely weird that they all of a sudden took 6 months off like that, only to come back with such lackluster updates, but hey, people were still hopeful and optimistic. I mean, after all, this game raised so much money and was backed by a successful plushie company. But much to their disappointment, the silence would begin again. And they would only receive another update yet another 4 months later on December 12th, 2024. And this time, it wasn't an update like the last one, it was a statement written by the CEO and co-founder David Pentland, where he would say, "Hey everyone, we know you've been eager to hear more about Island Skies, and we appreciate your patience as we've been navigating important internal changes. First, the game is still coming. This has set us back, but we expect to be able to maintain our original timeline within a few months. Below, I'll outline a bit of why we've had to stay so quiet and when we can expect things to improve. Following issues at the start of this year, it became clear that we needed to change how our team works. Part of this process was adjusting our contracts with the people working on the game to empower them beyond what their current contract supports. In the previous form of the contract, roles and deliverables were too specifically outlined, exposing team members to legal risk if they go outside or beyond their mandate, which for obvious reasons can introduce inefficiencies. All parties were entirely supportive of this change from the start, and there has been no conflict over the terms of the agreement. However, changes like this often involve legal hoops to jump through and boxes to check. This process is taking much longer than initially anticipated, and our current contract limits our ability to share anything until things are final. Whether it's content produced for the game, details about the reorganization process, or updates to the alpha build. Watching the frustration of the community without being able to communicate what's been happening has been the most difficult part of making Island Skies so far. Our team is eager to show you what we've been working on, and we know it's hard to wait for updates during this time. That said, these changes are necessary, and we will always do what needs to be done to make Island Skies a reality and the best game it can be. I'm very happy to have gotten the green light from all the lawyers involved to finally share this update and to be close to finishing up this process. We're planning to bring you another update like this by the beginning of February to share where things stand. Thank you for being with us through this. We're wishing you a happy holiday season, and we can't wait to share more with you in the new year. Signed, David." Whoa. What the hell was going on? But more importantly, how is this the backer's problem? This statement felt like David was just venting about legal issues he was having at his company without giving anyone any meaningful updates on the game itself. It just felt out of place. The community this time was not as supportive as the last update. They were disappointed with how little they were being communicated with, and a lot of them started getting very worried. Where is this game headed? It's been a long time, and we're still on Alpha 1.3. Nothing has been changed in the game itself. Nothing has been shared except a few pieces of concept art. And this is when people, just like this person here who's pledged $225, would start asking for refunds by emailing reports@fluffnest.com. This very professional and successful plushie company was losing all the goodwill it had garnered and used to make this game's funding possible. But we were only still at the tip of the iceberg. Around 3 weeks before this very disappointing update by David, Fluffnest would announce a Black Friday sale in which you could get 25% off its entire Puff Pals roster. Seeing that 25% is a large discount and the fact that many of these plushies won't be sold again, people would naturally jump at the opportunity to buy them. As a reminder, Black Friday typically occurs around the end of November. A month would then pass, and by the end of 2024, you start seeing more and more people complain about the fact that their shipment still hasn't arrived, even saying that Fluffnest had overcharged them for shipping. You'd start seeing many stories like this user here saying that this happened to them and that they have been emailing them for over a week to get a refund and that they never responded. They even detailed how for larger plushies they used to pay $9 for shipping, and for this Black Friday sale they were charging $25. So by this point, Fluffnest's reputation wasn't just being affected by the game's disastrous communication, it was being affected by its once great plushie business, period. And just as people were starting to understand that Fluffnest seemed like they were slowly falling apart, a user had found that the trademarks for Island Skies and Puff Pals had been inactive for over a year. But this was far from being the only thing that people had discovered by that point, because they would discover another bombshell. The fact that Puff Pals Island Skies was outsourcing the entire game to Room 8 Studio. Why is that a problem? Well, because it was never communicated, and Puff Pals made itself out to be something made in-house by showing us this very cute little drawing of their team. Anything from a programmer to game designer to a 3D modeler to an animator to a concept artist, while even listing some additional people they were receiving help from, most likely contractors, in different domains. This post was made in January 13, 2025. This was the first time some people were realizing that most of this game was outsourced. The fact that Studio 8 was literally the creator of Alpha 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3 was still news to the majority of this community. So much for transparency and communication, right? So as people were confronting the fact that they've been lied to by Puff Pal's Island Skies and that they were being scammed by Fluff Nest and its plushies, they would finally receive another update on February 8th, 2025 on the Kickstarter. It would say, "We're here to let you know that the next Alpha update, Alpha 2, is almost ready to roll out. We're finishing up some final adjustments to make sure the islands are in working order before we announce the official Alpha 2 release date. This next phase will bring new content and features to the game, and we're incredibly excited for you to play through it. We'll be sharing the Alpha 2 date and more detailed information about this update soon. We appreciate your patience as we get everything prepped and ready. We are super excited to get into this next testing phase and hear everyone's feedback. It's been a journey, and we hope you'll enjoy what we've created so far." They then talk about how they're not sure of dates yet, how long Alpha 2 is going to last, when early access is going to be, when the full release is going to be, pretty much saying that they're winging it. And then they would say, "Looking ahead, we're working to establish more consistent communication with you. Our goal is to get back to providing regular updates after Alpha 2's release." So overall,